Hey everyone, welcome to Animation Juice. My name is Richard and it's Monday, which means it's time for another animation tutorial. And in this week's episode, I'm going to show you how to do a sad walking flower sack. Now this is a progression from last week's episode where we looked at a flower sack walk cycle for the first time. But now we're going to try and get some more personality and emotion into it. And you can do all of that with just the simple mass of the flower sack. So let's jump in. So here we are in Flash, and what I've done, just as in last week, I have again done a really rough keying out of this of the one-step cycle, and you can see just how rough it is. I mean, look how scrappy the line work is. It's just incredibly scrappy, and this is going to be a sad, like I say, a sad flower sack walk. Now, despite it being scruffy, that's not the important thing right now. The important thing is to get the emotion and the personality and the feeling across. And if you can get it across in just really quick, scrappy thumbnails like these, you can have much more confidence that the time that you spend cleaning him up and adding in all the details and the overlapping action and everything else, it's going to turn out successfully. So here it is playing. Now I even added in sort of how I think the arms are going to work, just to try and, in my head at least, just try and picture that sort of the sideways swing that his top half is doing. Remember, this is the flower sack, and all of his weight is down in his feet, like he's wearing a big, like if we were wearing a really giant pair of elastic trousers filled with sand. You know, we'd have massive amounts of weight in our bottom half, and so we'd be doing a lot more work with our top half to try and take each step. So even though this one isn't as brisk as the previous episode's one, there's still going to be, he is quite sad, so there's not going to be that much movement, but there is going to be a little bit of movement from side to side. So you can add that in really roughly as well, and I think it helps also to visualize that torso movement. Now this is I believe this is this is an 8-frame cycle. If we look at the keyframes, this frame is really the same as this frame. In fact, they're identical frames. It's just either end of the walk, and it's got the same positions as the last week's episode. So it's got the down, the passing position, the up, the contact, and back to the down again. So if we look at this is the down, passing position, up, contact, down, passing position, up, contact, down. And there's not as much contrast between the down position and the up position, because this isn't a jaunty walk like this. This is a really sad, quite slow. Everything is more subdued. His personality is subdued, and so that translates into his bodily movement as quite subdued and less erratic. So, you know, there's the down. So it's just below our guideline there, and the up is barely above it. You see, so there is a subtle up and down, but it's not as great as last week's pretty standard happy walk. And like last week as well, just something else to note is the foot that's stepping down. So in the contact position, that's often, in most walks, it's the heel contacts the ground first. But as is, again, we get into his head and he's really sad, morose and dejected, he's really dragging his foot through. And it's only right at the last second. I mean, it barely gets off the ground, and it's sort of just sliding onto the ground. You know, he's barely off the ground. It's so floppy and draggy. It's really sort of just leading with the toe. The heel there's not enough force in him. He's not feeling the force to drive his heel to the ground first. So, you know, all of these are acting choices. When you start to think, what do people do when they're sad? What do they feel when they're sad? And how does that translate into their body, into their movement? And generally, when the sadder and more dejected you feel, you know, the less energy that's going through your body. You're just in a low energy, a low energetic state, I suppose to say. And so that just translates again to movement. Now, another thing to note as well. Now, you can also see that these keys. What I like to do is timing is really important for these for your animation as well. And whilst all of these keyframes are consecutive keyframes, so they're next to each other on the frame by frame, it plays very slowly because I've set the frame rate down all the way from 24, which is sort of the normal animation, all the way down to 4 frames per second. And that allows you to play with the timing. I think originally I sort of set it to 8 frames per second, and that's quite fast. The movement's there, but each step is going far too fast. He looks almost like he's really sullen, and he's been shunned. It's almost like a dramatically dejected walk, like he's been shunned by a girlfriend, or he's been told to go to his room and he's doing it. Whoopsie daisy. What's happening there? And he's doing it sort of in a huff. So so you can either time out the keyframes, or I find it's much quicker, if you're working in Flash, just to knock the frame rate around. And so I knocked it down to 6, and then hit Command Enter to publish it and view it at full speed. And it's better, but still it feels a little bit fast. So knock it down to 4 frames per second, and to me that feels much better. He does feel really sad and gloomy, and it's the emotion that we're trying to get in this walk. And so it's great to, if it feels like that at this stage with such scrappy line work, like I say, you can have the confidence that the time that you spend tidying him up and doing all the extra fluff to finesse the animation, it's going to be worthwhile, because the emotion is there already. So what I'm going to do, just like last week, is I'm going to tidy this up for starters. Then I'm going to spread the keyframes out and put in the in-betweens, and then finishing off just adding in the overlapping action on the arms, which is pretty much there already. So I'm going to tidy this up now, and then speed it up, and then we'll look at timing him out. So let's go. Okay, so I've tidied this guy up, and if we take a look at it now, it's a little bit cleaner. And let me just reiterate, the reason that I do clean it up is because not to make it look neat or make the animation look any better. It's just going to make the in-betweening. It's going to make the in-betweening easier if the lines are a bit more clearly defined. And also, I've given him a grey colour, again, not for really aesthetic reasons, but more for functional reasons, so that we can clearly see the distortion of the mass easier if it's sort of in a grey shape rather than just black on white. So, because it's really the shape changes that we're trying to get here, and a lot, like for instance, there's when he's coming up here, there's this stretch up. Let me get a pen. There's this sort of stretching happening. It's not as extreme as what we did last week, and you can still see that there's a curvature to the spine, but it is more stretched than this frame here. As you can see, there's like a shooting up, gradually going into this a very slight reverse curve of the spine. You know, you can just see the slight reversal of the spine from here to there. It's still sort of, it's almost straight with a slight curve to it, and then bang, poof, poof, poof. And that just adds a nice change of shape, and it just adds appeal, and just that it's that change, that visual change, that gives it a nice appeal and a nice flop as well, but without being too harsh. It's not going like this. But it does give a nice, when it's in between, it'll give it a nice, just a nice boof, 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 as he's walking along. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to just spread these keyframes out, whack the frames per second back up to 24, and then in between it. Now I know that I'm going to start each. I'm going to give each frame currently 6 frames, because this is running at 4 frames per second. So when we jump it up to 24 frames per second, each image, I want the timing to remain the same, and in order to get the timing to be the same at 24 frames per second, I'll need to show each of these keyframes currently for 6 frames. And then I'll start in between from there. So I hope that becomes clear when you see what I do, but that's what I will do, and I'm going to speed it up now, so let's go. So now you can see that each one of these frames is now lasts 6 frames, so that over the course of at 24 frames a second, we're going to see 6 drawings. You can see that there's 24 frames. We've got 4 drawings that are being shown. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now that's the same effect basically as what we had earlier when all of the keyframes, all of the images were consecutive keyframes, but the frame rate was yanked right down to 4 frames per second. It's the exact same thing. Now that we're at the in-betweening stage, this is of course allowing us to add the in-betweens. It's the exact same timing as before, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So here is the finished sad flower sack walk. Because this was quite a slow walk, there was a lot of in-betweens. There was no need for me to do all of the in-betweens. I could have kept it on 2s, but I'm a little OCD. But I do like how it looks really smooth and soft, and it's quite mellow. So anyway, let's just take a look at it. My favourite part about this are the arms. I'm pleased how the arms turned out. But you can see he's really slow and plodding, and it's not very extreme. There's not much extremes in terms of the weight, the shapes, and the weight shifting. But I think it works as a sad flower sack. Dejected might be the exact term for it. So let's just look at the positions. The down, passing position, going into the up, contact, down, passing position, up, back to the contact again. Now I said that wasn't that the toe was going to go first, but when I was in between this, it really felt like right at the last minute, the whole foot was drag, and it was only in the last few frames of the step did his sort of heel jut out and touch. I think some of the weight has been lost a little bit in the step. On this step, I'd like to have seen a little bit more weight transfer. But apart from that, I'm pleased with how this one has turned out. Just using this, just being conscious of those positions that we used last week: down, passing position, up, contact, down. Just using those positions and being aware of them, you can start to build loads of walks. But the main thing is just get into the mindset, like we did in the beginning. All of this, what's taken the longest amount of time is doing all the in-betweens. But this walk was complete or successful. Emotionally speaking, a few hours ago when we just had keyframed the main positions out, really thinking about the lethargy that this flower sack will be feeling. He's down and out, he's a bit depressed and dejected, which then transferred from his emotional state down into his body, and everything with the timing of this walk was much slower. There's less contrast and less erratic movement than in the previous week and the previous animation tutorials that we were looking at, the bouncing ball and the jumps and everything. This was a much more mellow movement, and yeah, so that's the main thing when it comes to emotional walks or emotional anything. Just get into the head of the character and thinking what is feeling and how does that manifest itself in the rest of the body. It really is just about bending your mind around the problem. I struggle to listen to music or anything when I'm doing this because my mind is completely. Music is very powerful in that it transports you to a different world. It transports you to the world of the music. It's very, very powerful. But I don't want to be in the world of the music. I want to be in the flower sack's head completely. You need to be the flower sack, and you need to really empathize and understand what's going on in his mind, so that you can feel it in your own body, and you begin to intuitively know what looks right and what doesn't look right, especially in these more subtle, softer emotions like sadness and melancholy. The quite erratic movement and bouncing around the screen is quite easy in terms of animation, because you can get away with a lot, both physically and emotionally. There's not much there. The animation doesn't have to be as effective, but in these more calmer, subtler, emotional moments, you really want to just put your mind 100% on the problem and just get rid of all your distractions. And so that's why I would suggest not listening to music. It's nice to listen to, but if you really want to, I find it's a personal preference perhaps, but I don't see how people can have one part of their mind on the music or the TV or the film they've got on the laptop, maybe sat next to the screen, and also in the screens. That's really, as along with the animation, what's, you know, another massively important part of animation is being in the character's head completely. Anyway, enough on that. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it's been, I'm not sure, now we're getting into sort of emotional acting choices. I'd be interested to hear your comments on how you think the format of the tutorials is working. Is there anything you'd like me to focus more on? Just let me know in the comments, and I'll absolutely be happy. I'd be really interested to see how you're liking them. We're going to be exploring other types of emotional walks in the future with the flour sack. But that's it for this episode, so over and out. So that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's really shown you how you can start to get some personality into a really simple mass such as the flour sack. It's a great learning tool, and I highly recommend you practice with it. If you like this episode, make sure to let me know by leaving a like and a comment, and make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. That's it for this week. Have a great week, guys, and I'll see you later.